I don't think it's about Brock. I think it's about the working environment of women within WWE.
That was Lance Storm, and he's not alone, because from backstage exposures and baseball bat threats to broken necks and billion-dollar lawsuits, WWE legends have finally broken their silence on Brock Lesnar, revealing affairs that destroyed marriages, confrontations that nearly turned violent, and allegations so disturbing they shook the entire industry. And what these icons revealed will change everything you thought you knew about the Beast, starting with the Janelle Grant lawsuit, because before we dive into the revelations from wrestling legends themselves, we must address the elephant in the room, the controversy that has cast the longest and darkest shadow over Brock Lesnar's career in recent memory, referring, of course, to the explosive civil lawsuit filed in 2024 by former WWE employee Janelle Grant, which names Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE itself as defendants and contains allegations so disturbing that they have fundamentally altered the landscape of professional wrestling discourse. And while Brock Lesnar is not technically listed as a defendant in this legal action, his name appears a staggering 44 times throughout the amended complaint, placing him squarely at the center of allegations involving sex trafficking, exploitation, and systematic abuse of power, and according to the lawsuit's detailed claims, McMahon allegedly used Grant as what the filing describes as a sexual pawn, specifically to entice Brock Lesnar during contract negotiations in 2021, with a complaint alleging that Grant was pressured into sending explicit photographs and even a video of an intimate nature, content which Lesnar allegedly received with enthusiasm, reportedly texting back that he liked what he saw while simultaneously using degrading language toward her if she delayed in sending the requested material. And the situation allegedly escalated further when McMahon reportedly arranged to fly Lesnar to Connecticut for what the filing disturbingly refers to as a play date, though this encounter reportedly never happened due to Lesnar's alleged heavy drinking. Now, it is absolutely crucial to note that Grant's legal representatives have explicitly clarified that Lesnar never physically met with Grant and that no non-consensual acts occurred directly involving him, yet the lawsuit portrays him as complicit within a broader scheme of exploitation. And that portrayal has consequences that reverberate throughout the wrestling industry, with the immediate fallout from these revelations being swift and severe, as Lesnar was effectively sidelined from WWE programming in early 2024, with planned appearances at both the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania completely scrapped overnight, his merchandise pulled from sale, his image removed from promotional materials, and for a time, it seemed as though the Beast incarnate had been permanently exiled from the company he had dominated for so long. But then came SummerSlam 2025, where Lesnar made a shocking return, attacking John Cena in a post-match assault that reignited the firestorm of controversy all over again, and Grant's representatives immediately condemned the move, accusing WWE of sweeping misconduct under the rug and prioritizing entertainment value over ethical considerations, while backstage reactions to Lesnar's return have been deeply divided, with insider reports claiming some talent members, particularly among the women's roster, were strongly against the decision, feeling that WWE was prioritizing cheap pops over genuine ethical responsibility, and production insiders noted that Lesnar didn't move the needle beyond the initial shock value, with certain segments described as embarrassing rather than compelling television. As of January 2026, the lawsuit remains unresolved, with motions for private arbitration from McMahon and WWE having been denied in July 2025, and recent developments include appeals regarding document production related to McMahon's payments, hinting at even deeper financial connections and potentially explosive new evidence yet to emerge. And while the drama continues to unfold, it is merely the most recent chapter in a much longer story of controversy surrounding the Beast. And speaking of stories that have shocked the wrestling world, we must now turn to one of the most disturbing personal accounts ever shared by a WWE personality, a revelation that came to light during the hashtag Speaking Out movement and continues to generate discussion to this very day, involving Terry Reynolds, former WWE manager and on-screen reporter, who dropped what remains one of the most jaw-dropping and disturbing revelations about Brock Lesnar's behavior during a Vice documentary that explored the darker side of professional wrestling, and what Reynolds described was not some minor backstage disagreement or personality conflict, but something far more serious, far more invasive, and far more indicative of the kind of environment that existed within WWE during those wild early 2000s years, as Reynolds alleged that Brock Lesnar exposed himself to her at a live event without any warning or consent whatsoever, leaving her feeling, in her own words, disrespected and uncomfortable in a way that stayed with her long after the incident occurred. And the incident reportedly took place around 2002 to 2004 at the Insurrection pay-per-view event in London, England, and according to Reynolds' account, which he has shared consistently across multiple platforms, including a 2020 on Sports podcast appearance and a 2004 PW Torch interview, Lesnar was backstage wearing nothing but a towel when he approached her and deliberately opened that towel to expose himself. The vivid and uncomfortable nature of Reynolds' description makes it clear just how violating this experience was for her, and she has emphasized repeatedly that this action was completely unsolicited and left her feeling genuinely violated in her own workplace. And the story gained significant additional traction when it resurfaced during the 2021 Dark Side of the Ring episode, which examined the infamous plane ride from hell incident, where Reynolds discussed the broader culture of harassment and the reasons why she and other women often chose not to report such incidents due to legitimate fears of professional repercussions. And what makes this revelation particularly significant is how it fits into a broader pattern of behavior that Reynolds has described, a boys' club environment where women were treated as second-class citizens at best and targets of harassment at worst. And Lesnar himself has never publicly addressed these specific allegations, maintaining his characteristic silence on personal controversies, but the story has added substantial fuel to ongoing criticisms of his behavior toward women in the wrestling industry, with fans across platforms like Reddit debating whether such incidents should be dismissed as mere locker room hijinks from a different era or whether they represent clear and unacceptable harassment that should have faced consequences then and deserves condemnation now. And the consensus among most reasonable observers tends toward the latter interpretation, and Reynolds' willingness to speak her truth has contributed to the ongoing conversation about accountability in professional wrestling. But Terry Reynolds was not the only woman to allegedly experience concerning behavior from Lesnar during his early career, as the next story takes us back even further to his developmental days in Ohio Valley Wrestling, where an incident so serious occurred that a legendary wrestling figure threatened Lesnar with physical violence to protect a young woman, with wrestling manager and podcaster Kenny Bolin never shying away from telling the unvarnished truth about what he witnessed during his years in the wrestling business. And when it comes to Brock Lesnar, Bolin dropped an absolute bombshell that paints a deeply troubling picture of the Beast's behavior even before he became a household name. The incident in question allegedly occurred back in 2001 at Ohio Valley Wrestling, WWE's developmental territory at the time, and it involved Lesnar and his then-girlfriend Nicole Mlan, who performed under the ring name Sin, and according to Bolin's detailed recounting of events on multiple podcast appearances, Lesnar allegedly physically violated Mlan against her explicit wishes shortly after she had received a piercing, causing her significant distress and pain when she had clearly communicated that such contact was unwelcome. And what happened next is the stuff of wrestling legend, involving one of the most colorful and outspoken figures the industry has ever produced, as legendary booker Jim Cornette, who was running OVW at the time and was known for his absolutely no-nonsense approach to maintaining order in his territory, reportedly confronted Lesnar directly about the incident. And when we say confronted, we mean that Cornette allegedly threatened Lesnar with a baseball bat, screaming that he would blow his head off if Lesnar ever returned to the territory, and this was not empty bluster from Cornette, a man whose volcanic temper and willingness to back up his words with action was already legendary throughout the wrestling world, and the result was Lesnar's temporary banishment from OVW, a serious consequence that highlighted just how seriously the incident was taken by those in positions of authority, with Bolin sharing this story numerous times across various platforms, and his consistency in the retelling lending it significant credibility. Is emphasized that Mlan explicitly refused the contact before it occurred, making the subsequent violation all the more troubling, and Cornette himself has corroborated elements of this story in his own commentaries, describing Lesnar as a hot-headed newcomer who desperately needed to be reined in before his behavior spiraled completely out of control. And while no legal action ever followed this incident, it has resurfaced repeatedly in wrestling lore, particularly amid Lesnar's more recent scandals, with podcasters and commentators using it to illustrate what they describe as early red flags in Lesnar's pattern of behavior toward women, and the incident stands as a stark reminder that the wild, largely unregulated world of developmental wrestling in the early 2000s was a place where figures like Bolin and Cornette often had to enforce their own form of justice to protect those who could not protect themselves. And while these allegations paint a disturbing picture, they are not the only personal entanglements that have generated controversy around Brock Lesnar, as the next story comes from a man who experienced Lesnar's impact on his personal life in a completely different but equally painful way. Mark Marrow, former WWE Intercontinental Champion, who occupies a unique position in the Brock Lesnar controversy, not as someone alleging misconduct, but as someone whose personal life was irrevocably altered by the Beast's romantic involvement with his then-wife, Sable. And for those who may not remember, Sable, whose real name is Rena Greek, was one of the biggest female stars in WWE during the late 1990s Attitude Era, and she was married to Mark Marrow, a talented wrestler in his own right, who had made the transition from WCW to WWE, and what Mero has revealed about discovering the affair between Sable and Lesnar provides a deeply personal glimpse into the human cost of backstage entanglements in professional wrestling. As in multiple interviews, Mero has been remarkably candid about the discovery and its aftermath.
You know, I eventually found out that it was Brock Lesnar. I mean, it was pretty obvious they were driving together and spending a lot of time together. And I told this funny story on JR's podcast, but I said, you know, when I find out who this guy is, I'm going to beat the tar out of it.
The irony of that statement was not lost on Mero or anyone who heard him tell it, because when he finally discovered that the man his wife was seeing was the absolutely massive and physically intimidating Brock Lesnar, any thoughts of physical confrontation quickly evaporated, as Mero has recounted with characteristic self-deprecating humor, and upon learning it was Lesnar, he wisely decided to back off from any notion of settling things with his fists, and the affair, which reportedly began around 2003, has been fodder for wrestling gossip for over 2 decades, with Mero's willingness to discuss it openly providing a rare window into the personal toll that such situations take on everyone involved. And what adds another layer to this story is what Lesnar himself wrote in his 2011 autobiography, Death Clutch, where he admitted to wanting Sable out of WWE entirely due to the testosterone-fueled environment and his jealousy over other men's advances toward her, and this possessive side of Lesnar's personality, revealed in his own words, takes on additional significance when viewed alongside the other allegations and incidents that have accumulated over the years, and Mero, for his part, has expressed that the split ultimately led to personal growth for him, and in recent interviews from 2024 and 2025, he has said that if he could speak to Sable today, his message would simply be, "Thank you for inadvertently freeing him to find a better path," yet his story remains an important piece of the complex puzzle that is Brock Lesnar's legacy, and from personal betrayals, we now transition to physical ones, as our next legend story involves an in-ring incident so severe that it left him unable to compete for over a year, and the truth about what really happened that night remains a subject of intense debate among wrestling fans, involving Hardcore Holly, because the feud between Hardcore Holly and Brock Lesnar carries with it a weight that goes far beyond typical wrestling rivalries, as this particular conflict resulted in genuine, serious, career-threatening physical injury. The year was 2002, and Brock Lesnar was still in the relatively early stages of his meteoric rise through WWE, and during a match on SmackDown, Lesnar attempted to execute a powerbomb on Hardcore Holly, and something went terribly, terribly wrong, resulting in a broken neck for Holly, an injury so severe that it required surgery and sidelined him from competition for an agonizing 13 months, and for a professional wrestler whose livelihood depends entirely on his ability to perform physically, 13 months might as well be a lifetime. And when Holly returned to WWE programming, he wasted no time cutting promos that called out Lesnar, declaring that Lesnar had made a mistake by not finishing him off when he had the chance. And the intensity of Holly's words suggested genuine animosity, the kind of heat that transcends scripted storylines and enters the realm of real-life resentment. And here is where the story takes a fascinating and somewhat controversial turn, because in his autobiography, The Hardcore Truth, Holly made a startling admission that he had deliberately sandbagged the powerbomb, intentionally making his body difficult to lift as a form of hazing against the young, rocket-strapped rookie. And this practice of veterans testing newcomers through dangerous in-ring sabotage was unfortunately common during that era, but Holly's version of the test backfired catastrophically when Lesnar, struggling to lift the resisting veteran, dropped him awkwardly onto his head and neck, and in a 2015 interview with Wrestling Inc., Holly provided additional details about the spot, explaining how Lesnar's attempt at a powerbomb reversal combined with Holly's resistance created the perfect storm for disaster, leaving Holly with fractured vertebrae in his neck and requiring extensive surgery to repair the damage. While Hardcore Holly has taken partial responsibility for his own role in the incident, he has also noted that Lesnar's relative inexperience at the time contributed to the severity of the outcome, and fans who have analyzed the footage, which remains available on YouTube, can see Lesnar visibly struggling to lift the sandbagging Holly before the drop that changed everything, with some calling the injury cathartic justice for Holly's attempt at hazing, while others view it as a tragic example of how dangerous old-school wrestling traditions could be, and either way, the incident fueled their subsequent in-ring rivalry, including a 2004 match where Holly specifically targeted Lesnar's neck in what can only be described as scripted revenge with very real emotion behind it. And while physical confrontations inside the ring are one thing, Brock Lesnar's controversies extend beyond matters of bodies and bumps, as our next legend addresses a different kind of controversy entirely, one that questions the very foundation of Lesnar's supposedly natural physical dominance, and 5-time WCW champion Booker T, has shared both lighthearted and deeply serious anecdotes about Brock Lesnar over the years, with his observations carrying significant weight given his own legendary status in the wrestling industry, and on the lighter side. Booker has recounted hilarious backstage moments where Lesnar's intensity inadvertently cracked up everyone in the locker room, revealing glimpses of a more human side to the beast that fans rarely get to see. But Booker has also touched upon far more serious matters, specifically the persistent questions surrounding Lesnar's use of performance-enhancing substances throughout his career, and the facts of the matter are well documented, as Lesnar was arrested in 2003 for possession of what turned out to be legal supplements, charges that were ultimately dropped. But then came the far more damaging 2016 UFC drug test failure that detected clomiphene in his system, a substance often used as a masking agent for steroid use, and this failure resulted in a suspension from UFC competition and cast a long shadow over his accomplishments in mixed martial arts, where his 5-3 record had already revealed vulnerabilities that contradicted the image of an unstoppable, natural beast. Booker T discussed the UFC suspension in a 2016 interview, suggesting that perhaps WWE should consider similar or even harsher punishments for such violations, a stance that not all of his fellow legends would necessarily share. And on his podcast, Booker has also addressed the 2006 Signature Pharmacy scandal, which linked several wrestlers, allegedly including Lesnar, to a network that distributed performance-enhancing drugs, and these revelations collectively undermine what Booker and others have called the natural beast mythology that WWE has cultivated around Lesnar for decades. Because can anyone truly be considered a natural freak of nature when evidence suggests chemical assistance played a role in sculpting that physique? And Booker's comments from 2025 regarding Lesnar's return to WWE drew particular backlash when he said he was glad Lesnar got his money. Without acknowledging the ongoing lawsuit controversy, a statement critics viewed as tone-deaf at best and complicit at worst, and the steroid questions represent yet another layer of the complex, controversial legacy that follows Brock Lesnar wherever he goes. But questions about what substances may or may not have coursed through Lesnar's veins are one thing, while questions regarding his work ethic and willingness to put on great matches are another. And our next legend has plenty to say about that particular subject. Jon Moxley, former WWE star who performed under the name Dean Ambrose during his tenure with the company, and he has been nothing short of scathingly vocal about his frustrations with working against Brock Lesnar, with his criticisms painting a picture of a performer who simply did not care enough to deliver the kind of match that fans deserved. And the setting for this particular drama was WrestleMania 32, where Moxley and Lesnar faced off in a no-holds-barred street fight that had been hyped to the moon as an absolutely chaotic, brutal, must-see encounter, yet what fans actually got was a straightforward, almost pedestrian match that failed to live up to even a fraction of the carnage that had been promised in the build-up. According to Moxley's subsequent shoot interviews and public comments, the blame for this massive disappointment falls squarely on Lesnar's lack of interest, as Moxley revealed that he had pitched numerous extreme ideas for the match, including the use of thumbtacks, barbed wire, and other hardcore staples that would have made the no-holds-barred stipulation actually mean something, yet Lesnar reportedly rejected every single suggestion, showing what Moxley described as complete and utter disinterest in putting together a match that would steal the show. And the way Moxley tells it, Lesnar seemed to believe that merely sharing the ring with him would be enough to elevate Ambrose in the eyes of fans, as if his mere presence was sufficient without any actual effort on his part. And Moxley described being met with straight-up laziness during the entire process, from the planning stages through the execution of the match itself, noting that Lesnar arrived late to discussions and dismissed elaborate plans with the dismissiveness of a man who believed the rules simply did not apply to him. And while Paul Heyman, Lesnar's longtime advocate and manager, defended his client by suggesting that Moxley's own attitude had soured the collaborative process, Heyman's loyalty to Lesnar is well known and his perspective must be weighed accordingly. And the drama surrounding this match highlights what many perceive as Lesnar's sense of entitlement as a highly paid part-timer, a performer who expects main event status and main event money while delivering what critics argue amounts to part-time effort, with Moxley's resentment clearly persisting long after he departed WWE for greener pastures in AEW, and his willingness to speak publicly about these frustrations has contributed significantly to ongoing debates about Lesnar's professionalism and dedication to the craft. If Moxley's criticisms focused on Lesnar's professional laziness, our next legend's confrontation with the Beast revealed something far more aggressive and potentially dangerous in Lesnar's personality, as Chris Jericho, WWE Hall of Famer and one of the most decorated and respected performers in professional wrestling history, whose career has spanned multiple decades and continents, earning him the adoration of fans and the respect of his peers, has shared first-hand accounts of a heated backstage confrontation with Brock Lesnar that people take very seriously, and the incident in question occurred immediately following SummerSlam 2016. A night that would become infamous for one of the most controversial match finishes in recent WWE history, when Lesnar faced Randy Orton in the main event and ended the match by opening Orton with a series of legitimately brutal elbow strikes that left the legend killer bleeding profusely from his skull and suffering a genuine concussion, and Jericho, watching backstage and concerned for his friend Orton's well-being, was unsure whether what he was witnessing was a planned part of the match or whether Lesnar had gone into business for himself. So he confronted Lesnar in the gorilla position immediately after the match, and what followed was a moment of genuine tension that nearly escalated into physical violence.
No, the switch flipped, and I was like, fuck it, I don't care. I remember just looking at him, and it's like, if he hits me, I'm gonna bite his nose off. And he would have killed me. Like, thankfully, we didn't get it.
According to detailed accounts of the confrontation, things escalated quickly, as Lesnar reportedly shoved Jericho and used homophobic slurs before mockingly kissing Jericho on the forehead and daring him to either hit me or kiss me, and the pair nearly came to blows before being physically separated by Triple H and Vince McMahon himself, with Jericho later clarifying that his intention had been to check on Orton's safety rather than start a fight, but Lesnar's aggressive response transformed a moment of concern into a potential backstage brawl, and Orton himself confirmed afterward that the bloody finish had been scripted, but admitted that Lesnar's stiffness had gone too far, causing more damage than intended, and the incident exposed real tension over Lesnar's willingness to blur the lines between performance and genuine violence, highlighting the intimidating presence that allows Lesnar to operate by different rules than his colleagues, and Chris Jericho is far from the only legend to have experienced real-life tension with Brock Lesnar, as our next story involves arguably the most legendary figure in WWE history, a man whose very presence commands respect, and even he found himself at odds with the Beast, the Undertaker, because when we discuss legendary figures in WWE history, no name looms larger than the Undertaker, whose 30-plus year career established him as the conscience of the locker room, the final boss of WrestleMania, and the living embodiment of respect for the wrestling business. So it speaks volumes that even the Undertaker had real-life heat with Brock Lesnar over issues that transcended their on-screen rivalry, with the core of the Undertaker's frustration reportedly centered on Lesnar's part-time status and what the Phenom perceived as laziness that disrespected the full-time performers who were grinding night after night while Lesnar collected massive paychecks for sporadic appearances. The tension between these two giants reached a visible peak in 2015, when following a match where Undertaker cost Lesnar a victory, a backstage brawl erupted on Raw that was intense enough to clear the locker room as these two behemoths traded legitimate blows, with the sight of two of the most physically imposing performers in wrestling history going at it for real, scattering everyone else in the vicinity. A testament to the genuinely dangerous nature of the confrontation, and the Undertaker's old-school dedication to the business, his belief in paying dues and earning your spot through hard work and sacrifice, clashed fundamentally with what he perceived as Lesnar's entitled attitude toward his privileged schedule and premium compensation, and of course, the two men share a history that complicates their relationship in unique ways, as it was Brock Lesnar who ended The Undertaker's legendary undefeated WrestleMania streak at WrestleMania XXX, a shocking moment that sent shockwaves through the wrestling world and fundamentally altered both men's legacies. And while there was reportedly mutual respect for what they accomplished together in the ring, the backstage tensions over Lesnar's work ethic and compensation cast a shadow over their professional relationship, because The Undertaker represents everything that old-school wrestling values stand for: dedication, sacrifice, loyalty to the business, and respect for those who came before. And in Lesnar, he saw someone who had been handed opportunities that others would kill for, but approached those opportunities with what The Undertaker viewed as insufficient gratitude and effort. And The Undertaker was not the only giant who found himself frustrated with Lesnar's attitude, as our final legend story involves a man who literally helped make Brock Lesnar look like a monster, only to feel that his contributions were never properly appreciated: Big Show, Paul White. Better known to wrestling fans as Big Show, a legitimate giant whose career has been built on making other performers look incredible through his willingness to take massive bumps and sell like his life depended on it. And when he speaks about his frustrations with Brock Lesnar, the resentment is clear. Those words carry the weight of someone who genuinely helped build the Beast's early career mythology, as Big Show has expressed that he felt deeply unappreciated by Lesnar despite putting him over multiple times in spectacular fashion, taking bumps that no man his size should ever have to take in service of elevating a younger star. And consider what Big Show sacrificed for those matches. He took a superplex that literally collapsed the ring, one of the most iconic visual moments of that era, and he was lifted impossibly high on a forklift in segments that could have ended catastrophically if anything had gone wrong, and these were not safe, comfortable bumps, but high-risk maneuvers that shorten careers and break bodies, and while Big Show has credited Lesnar for inadvertently reviving his career by specifically requesting to work with him and acknowledged that their big man battles produced genuinely destructive classic moments that fans still talk about today, that acknowledgement comes with a significant caveat, because despite all of his efforts and all of his physical sacrifices, Big Show has said that he felt Lesnar showed a complete lack of gratitude for everything he did to make those matches successful, with the veteran's efforts to elevate the younger star met not with appreciation, but with what Big Show perceived as indifference or even dismissiveness, and this dynamic, where a veteran gives everything to build a rising star only to receive nothing in return, is unfortunately common in wrestling, but it stings particularly when the beneficiary of that generosity is someone like Lesnar, who had every opportunity in the world handed to him from the very beginning, and Big Show's frustrations speak to a broader pattern of behavior that multiple legends have identified, because Brock Lesnar, for all his natural gifts and championship accomplishments, appears to many who have worked with him as fundamentally self-centered and ungrateful for the shoulders of giants upon which his career was built.